First, I just want to apologize for the poor audio quality as the wind is absolutely whipping today. In my Swarm review video, I stated that it was the first beefy mid-range from Discraft, that finally Discraft had a beefy mid-range, and some people had inquired about the drone because the drone is an overstable mid-range from Discraft. This disc battle, we are pitting both the Swarm against the drone to see which one truly is the most overstable. Let's go ahead and kick off this disc battle by taking a look at the profile and specification differences of the drone and the Swarm. With the drone noticeably a much more rounded shoulder and has a decent amount of dome in the middle of the flight plate, while the Swarm has a very sharp shoulder and a drastically flatter flight plate. It's also worth noting that the beveled edge on the drone is much more concave than it is on the Swarm. This, along with the gradual shoulder and the dome that the drone has, leads it to feel better for backhand grips and not very comfortable for forehand, versus on the flip side, the Swarm with that flatter flight plate, much more comfortable when it comes to forehand and less so when it comes for backhand. For the flight numbers, I'll admit I was wrong. The drone, by the numbers, is actually supposed to be more overstable than the Swarm, but we'll see if that holds up through this battle. Now, just to kind of get a glimpse of what wind conditions I was dealing with to test these, yeah, these were about 15, gusting up to 30-mile-an-hour winds. Absolutely perfect conditions to test these two overstable mid-ranges. So just a disclaimer, I am a slower arm speed player, topping out with distance drivers, probably I'd say about 315 to 325 on a really good day. These first shots with the drone and the Swarm are on just pure hyzers, and they do hold up very well in this 15, gusting up to 30-mile-an-hour headwinds. And when thrown on the hyzer lines, I did notice that the drone would actually push forward a little bit further than the Swarm, as once the Swarm reaches its apex, it all of a sudden just comes crashing straight down to the ground, resulting in a big loss when it came to distance. I mean, the gusting up to 30-mile-an-hour headwinds, I mean, that didn't really help distance much at all either. Now, when it comes to throwing both these discs flat, that's where you really start seeing some major differences in the flight. The drone definitely was affected by the wind a lot more than the Swarm. The drone, when thrown flat, it kind of gets played with a little bit. It tries like it's wanting to hyzer back. It's not fully turning over, but it really straightens it out. Versus the Swarm, again, it starts out straight, but then as soon as it starts going on that hyzer angle, it wants nothing to do with going straight. It just hyzers out right away. When thrown on a slight anhyzer line, the drone did hold that turn for a good portion of the flight, but it did try to stable up after about 2/3, 3/4 of the flight before having a decent finish at the very end because it was thrown up in the air, whereas the Swarm barely held that turn. It held it for just maybe the first 25% of the flight before it auto-corrected back to flat, and then as it got to nearly about half to 2/3 of the way through the flight, right about here, it was like, nope, I'm sorry, I'm just going to dive bomb back to the ground. And when it comes to steep anhyzer lines, this is where you really see the difference between the two mid-ranges. As the drone, it held that turn all the way off the screen, versus the Swarm, as soon, again, it just auto-corrects level and then just starts the hyzer back right away. It does not like to hold any kind of turn whatsoever, versus the drone held that all the way to the ground. Again, this is a very exaggerated steep anhyzer line, but it really shows you just how much more torque resistance and how the Swarm's overstability is on a whole different level. But before we just declare the Swarm the winner, we do have to see how they hold up against extra torque that you get when throwing on forehand. It's also worth noting that now we have a 15 to 30 mile an hour left to right crosswind, which is holding the discs up and preventing them from really hyzering out. Or I guess a right to left crosswind when you come to these mirrored shots. Once you start ramping up that torque, you are going to notice a little bit of turn in the Swarm. It's very slight, but you are going to notice it a little bit more once you start getting a lot of torque on it. However, it does still check up very, very quickly and has that really predictable, harsh finish, versus the drone, once you start getting it on more and more of an anhyzer angle, you can really see that it holds that turn, and you really have to throw it high to get it to fight out, whereas the Swarm still is like, no, I don't really care about holding an anhyzer line. It auto-corrects back to flat, and then as soon as it starts to get on that hyzer line, it is going to hyzer out. However, that also means that the drone has much more distance potential, as for me, the drone was always going 15 to 30 feet further than the Swarm, just because the Swarm would check up so much sooner in the flight. Well, it's not going to come to any surprise that the winner of this battle is going to be the Swarm. It doesn't matter if it's a calm day, it doesn't matter if the winds are 30 plus miles an hour. The Swarm just does not care. It is going to fly the same no matter the weather conditions, so it's always going to be extremely trustworthy no matter where you live and what conditions you're throwing in. Now, not to say that the drone is not an overstable mid-range, because it definitely is, and for slower arms this is going to be a great overstable mid-range, one I would highly recommend just because it's a little bit more controllable. The issue is as you really ramp up to the extremes, it can start to get a little bit squirrely. But again, how often are you throwing into a 30-mile-an-hour headwind? Which is why for us slower arms, I would always recommend the drone over the Swarm, just because the Swarm, it's just way too obscenely overstable for players with slower arm speeds. Just good luck trying to find one, as the drone is out of production versus the Swarm is a stock run. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Also, let me know if you like this new format and style for the disc battles. I hope to do more of these in the future. Also, be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Use that code LEFTY to get your next order and save. Till the next one, keep banging chains.